Warned that half of the world's sandy beaches could disappear by the end of the century if climate change continues unchecked. The study, published in the journal Nature Climate Change, says Australia would be hardest hit in terms of total beach coastline lost, with over 12,000 kilometres at risk. Here's Dr Hannah Power from the University of Newcastle. Hi, Hannah. So why are sandy beaches under such threat?
Well, sandy beaches are naturally dynamic environments that move around with things like storms and changes in sea level, and that's because the sand is movable, it's unconsolidated. And so as sea levels rise, what typically happens with beaches is that they move upwards and landwards. And so because Australia has such a long coastline, we therefore have a really high risk in terms of the length of coastline that has the potential to be affected by sea level rise.
So how much beach and sand could be lost? How far would the erosion stretch?
So it depends from site to site. And in the southeast of Australia, for example, the numbers that we're seeing in terms of some of the detailed modelling that's been done, particularly for New South Wales, is that we would expect to see approximately 100 to 150 metres of coastal erosion by 2100. So that's really significant, particularly because we place a very high value on our coastal regions and our beaches particularly, and also because we have a lot of infrastructure and development along our coastal zones.
So what would be the environmental and other impacts of losing sandy beaches?
Well, there'd obviously be an economic impact because we rely on our beaches a lot for tourism. There'd also be personal impacts in terms of people's property would be affected, and we saw examples of that back in 2016 when we had a very significant storm event which had very significant impacts on the New South Wales coastline. There'd also be impact on our coastal biodiversity in terms of biological organisms that live within our dunes. They would be impacted. And one of the big challenges here is that because we have so much infrastructure and property developed along our coastline, is that we're not going to want that beach to erode into that region. And so we have a situation where we have a process called coastal squeeze, where the beach wants to move landwards, but we have a fixed line, whether that be a road or a property or some other hard structure like a seawall, beyond which the beach cannot move.
Okay, so what can be done then to protect beaches, Hannah? Is there a value to building sea defences and sea walls?
So there are a number of different options. The most clear-cut option is to reduce carbon dioxide emissions and greenhouse gas emissions really urgently and really significantly and in a really sustained manner, because that puts us on a really different path in terms of the amount of sea level rise that we would expect to see. In terms of what we can do in the fact that we will still have sea level rise even if we do reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, we need to look at how we're going to plan for this. And so there are a number of different options. We can go for hard engineering structures, like you mentioned, seawalls and things like this. One of the problems with building a seawall is often the beach will erode back to that seawall and you effectively lose the beach itself. An alternative is to do what we refer to as soft engineering approaches, where we might, for example, replenish the sand on the beach artificially with sand that we source from somewhere else. So this is a way of maintaining a beach and contributing to the amount of sand that's on the beach, actively contributing to it, in order to maintain that beach environment. And then another approach is what we refer to as planned retreat, where we essentially move upwards and backwards and we move our communities and our infrastructure away from the coastline to give that beach space to move in light of sea level rise.
Dr Hannah Power in Newcastle, thank you.
Thank you.